Happy New Year. I hope 2023 has started off well for you. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm Christina Gray. I'm the NDP Labour Critic, and I'm joined by my colleague, NDP Economic Development Critic, Deron Bilous. And we'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on traditional territory of Treaty 6 and recognize the Métis people who share a very deep connection with this land. Albertans now have a very clear idea of Danielle Smith's priorities. Rather than building a plan to support good jobs and encourage investment, Smith and the UCP have chosen to double down on their job-killing agenda. She started with the Job-Killing Sovereignty Act, opposed by constitutional experts, business leaders, municipal leaders, Indigenous communities, and many, many more. And while the UCP have forced through this awful piece of legislation, described by Don Braid as the worst piece of legislation introduced into the legislature, it is important to remember that this is only step one in Danielle Smith's plan. A plan that includes hijacking Albertans' pensions, imposing a provincial police force that Albertans do not support, and creating an Alberta revenue agency that will be a multi-million-dollar boondoggle. A plan that will do nothing but add red tape to Albertans and pile costs on small businesses that are already struggling. Danielle Smith has made it clear that this is a top priority of hers. It's featured heavily in the Free Alberta strategy that she endorsed and was written by her senior advisor, Rob Anderson. She promoted it heavily during her leadership campaign, even claiming that the Alberta Revenue Agency would be paid for with money from an Alberta pension plan. She directed the finance minister to come up with recommendations for how to start this off in her mandate letter to him. And she claimed it would be as simple to set up. She said, quote, "We could say to Ottawa, we're collecting our own personal income taxes, and we could let the payroll companies know, and all they would do is just create a new line item." This is how Smith is describing setting up a revenue agency just last April. Simply a matter of phone calls. The reality is, this plan will cost taxpayers millions and make life more expensive for small businesses by hammering them with more red tape. University of Calgary professor Trevor Toome pointed out over 3 years ago that an Alberta revenue agency would waste $500 million a year in just setting up the agency. He also described this plan as, quote, "a bad idea that could cost hundreds of millions of dollars, expand the public service, and create hassle for individuals and business." Now, Danielle Smith's own ignorance could cost Albertans their retirement security. Alberta pensions are not political toys. Furthermore, her ideas could also lead to hundreds of millions of dollars in new costs that will ultimately be downloaded to small business, and that will ultimately cost Albertans jobs. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Deron to make some additional comments.
Thank you, Christina. Small businesses are struggling across Alberta. Recently released data from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, the CFIB found that 24% of Alberta small businesses are at risk of shutting their doors. That's the highest rate in all of Canada. Our caucus has been engaging with those small businesses to work on solutions and strategies to ensure that they are supported to grow and to thrive. But Danielle Smith and her government are planning to download $500 million in new costs onto small businesses. This plan will devastate some small businesses and do nothing for Albertans. And Albertans agree. The government's own Fair Deal panel actually recommended against proceeding with a revenue agency. Their analysis found, and this is a direct quote, "Many Albertans, including business owners and operators, expressed reservations about this idea. They argued that if both Alberta and the federal government had systems to collect their respective portions of personal income taxes, that would create extra costs, duplicate collection efforts, and significantly increase red tape," end quote. It's clear that Smith doesn't understand the consequences of her own policies, or she doesn't care about the businesses and jobs this plan will hurt. Smith needs to reverse course on this wasteful boondoggle immediately. But if the Premier refuses to listen to what Albertans are telling her, the next Alberta NDP government will. Both Christina and I are here today to pledge that should Alberta's NDP form the next government, we will put an immediate stop to any move to create an Alberta pension plan and an Alberta revenue agency. We'll put a stop to these bad ideas so that we can get on to what matters: creating jobs, fixing our healthcare system, building schools, making life better for Alberta, and diversifying our resilient economy. Thank you, and we'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Deron, and thank you, Christina. For reporters joining us over Zoom, it's the usual. Please use the raise hand function to join the question queue. Our first question comes from Catherine Gurkowski from Alberta Today. Go ahead, Catherine.
Could you explain how a provincial pension plan would download the costs onto small businesses?
The provincial pension fund? Sure. Or not the pension fund, sorry. You mean the revenue agency?
Yeah, revenue agency, yeah, sorry.
Yep, no problem. Essentially what that would mean for businesses is they would have to file two different sets of tax forms. And I can tell you that the small businesses that we've been engaging with have said they're busy running their business. Completing one form is onerous enough. Putting a second form onto small businesses is creating red tape. It's actually doing the opposite of what this government claims to do. It also would expand government dramatically by creating another branch and having to hire many new folks. And so Alberta businesses have told us that they do not want a separate Alberta revenue agency. They want to focus on creating jobs, on the economy getting back on the right track, and this is a distraction. It's further red tape and would actually cost them more in time and money if they had to file two different sets of tax forms.
A follow-up, Catherine?
I guess I'm trying to figure out the mechanism, and maybe you don't know, but why would you need two forms? Why wouldn't you just file with Alberta? Why would you have to file Alberta and Canada?
Well, businesses would still have to file their federal income taxes, and so they'd be obligated to do two different sets of tax forms instead of just one.
Do you need one more follow-up, Catherine?
No, that's okay. Thanks.
Okay. I'll just do another call for questions. If there's reporters on the line who'd like to ask a question, you can raise hand. Next question comes from Darcy from City News.
Hi there, thank you. I apologize, this is a little unrelated to what you folks are talking about today, but I was wondering if you could just give a comment on your fundraising numbers for the year. Obviously, Rachel Notley was tweeting about that earlier. Just, is there any comment from your end on that? Just what you'd like to see about those numbers?
Sure, I'll turn to Christina for comment.
Sure. Thank you, Darcy. We are extremely excited and grateful that so many Albertans have chosen to support us, many first-time donors, and we're having not just a record fundraising year, but we had a record fundraising quarter and a record fundraising day on December 31st. And I think it shows how many Albertans are concerned about the agenda that this government has set out upon that they disagree with. Everything from what we're talking about today, the Alberta Pension Plan, and the Alberta Revenue Agency, which Albertans do not support. In fact, this government's own Fair Deal panel said do not do these things, to what we're seeing in the chaos of healthcare, what we're seeing with the education system and its underfunding, large classroom sizes, and the misguided curriculum that this government keeps moving forward. All of these things have contributed to a record number of Albertans supporting the Alberta NDP with their fundraising and building towards an election campaign in May of 2023 where the Alberta NDP will form government.
Any follow-up, Darcy?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Thanks, Darcy. We'll just I'll do one last call for questions from folks joining us on the line. It's the raise hand function on Zoom. Okay, seeing none, we will conclude today's news conference. Happy New Year to everyone, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.